protect, access, and share. Well, we're adding a fourth string to our bow, and that is manage. And that's embodied in the new SOS Pulse management framework. And Pulse is about three things. It's about deploying, it's about controlling, and it's about reporting. And I think many of you will have got an email actually from our marketing team which links you to the website. And if I pull up our website, here on the control panel it's listed. And you can get a sense of all of the features built into the Pulse system here around those three verbs of deploy, report, and control. But and actually that's probably not a bad place to start, because this sort of little mission statement here is really what Pulse was all about. The question we get, and got a lot, is how do you deploy online backup to 1,000 PCs and then manage the backup life cycle? And it's nearly impossible. There is no solution out there in the market that lets you do this. So if you are managing, let's say you've got 100 customers and each customer's got 10 PCs, and you want to deploy online backup to those. Deploying to that network, managing that network, and controlling that network has before now been a very manual process. You've actually had to usually have physical or remote access to the computers that you want to manage. With Pulse, we've now got, SOS is really leading the market with launching a solution that allows you to deploy backups with a simple deployment tool. So the Pulse deployment tool lets you deploy to all of the PCs on your network and then apply policies intelligently based on rule sets that you can control. Lets you build custom installers on demand, so you can build different clients based on different business needs that you've got right from your own portal and then deploy it out to your network. It also is compatible with all the major deployment frameworks you might be using. So, if you've got a Windows Server network, Windows Server Deployment Services is excellent, for example. But allows you to push updates as well across the network and make certain that all of your clients are connected and up to date. So actually, let's look at Pulse itself. Now, I'm going to need some help here just to verify that you can see the screen, because it's a very light color set, and sometimes the GoToMeeting software washes it out. So can I just get a confirmation that the audience, that you can see this web browser clearly enough? Okay, right. Getting people saying it's small. Yep. Okay. I've tried to then make it larger. Hopefully that's better. I'm saying, yep, it's too. Yeah. Okay. Lots of feedback. Thank you. All right. Most people seem to be saying they can see it. Okay. So this is the Pulse Management Console, and you'll notice it's very data-driven. So in Pulse, we think about, well, look, when we're thinking about managing a client network, we think about a few different things. We think about machines that we're backing up to. We think about backup accounts, because everybody's got to have a subscription to connect to the cloud. Pulse users, that's just being able to log into this particular application. Now, deployments, this is the actual nodes out there that I'm managing. So if I've deployed Matt McGlone online backup to 1,000 PCs, every one of those PCs is a deployment. If I put 2 accounts on every PC, I've got 2,000 deployments. So a deployment's a combination of a subscription on a machine. Events and reports, so all sorts of reports in here on backup sessions and events, and we'll see the sorts of events that I can report on. And backup policies, this is the control feature. So I think we've talked about deployment, but let's just briefly, I'll just give you a sense of how simple deployment is in the Pulse world. On the screen here is the Pulse Deploy utility, and this is a small utility that can be scripted on the command line, or it's got a WinForms interface, as you can see here, which takes the credentials of your Pulse server and your backup client. This wouldn't be SOS. For you, it would be, Earl Johnson Online Backup.exe, and then an account username and password. And then what this tool does is, you can see here it's saying, make certain you're running Pulse Deploy with administrative privileges. I can click yes, and away it goes. It's now downloading the client from the cloud. It's going to install the backup client. It's then going to download the Pulse framework and install that on the client, and then register the backup subscription, and then apply whatever policies exist for it. Now, this is all fully rebrandable, and this would be customized to you. And as I said, there's a command line interface version of Pulse Deploy, which lets you do this with no UI. So if you're deploying over a network and you don't want any GUI to be presented, you can just do it with the command line tool. And it's highly configurable, so you can set up your own rules on demand. And What Pulse Deploy lets you do is then configure what you want to be installed on every machine, and then roll it out. You can deploy multiple accounts to a given machine. So this is an extremely simple way of deploying the online backup technology out to as many PCs as you've got in your given network. Now, if we look at what we then see once the deployment phase is over, you'll actually see if I go to my deployments and I look at my deployments, I can see that I've got a bunch of deployments here already configured. So if I'll expand this, so it's showing. Okay, so here's all the deployments that are on my Pulse server. So I'm controlling well, it's two pages. I'm controlling 40 deployments here in this particular view. And you might notice that it's a combination of a username and a machine, so I can actually have multiple policies applied to a machine. So if I just want to filter and look at, say, one machine, I know that this machine has a lot of policies running on it. So that's how many backup sets I've got running on that particular machine. I can filter everything in Pulse by the other related objects. So if I get rid of that filter there, I get all my data. And you'll notice here that I've got a bunch of metadata about a deployment. If I go back, you can see the sort of metadata that we're holding about a machine. For example, I can see that that particular box is running Windows 7 64-bit. This is where the backup client was installed. This is where the logs are. This is the version of the technology it's running, the debug level, the time zone it's in. But I'm probably only interested in machine-level information if I'm debugging things. What I'm probably more interested in is looking at deployments and then, say, looking at what policies are being run. So you can see here, if I sort by policy, I can see which deployments I've got out there that I'm managing, and then which policies are applied to which deployment. So again, looking at Wagner LT, it's actually a sales engineer's computer, we can see that he's got John's workstation policy applied to that particular workstation. If I want to drill in, I can see that policy. And that policy says that it's a demo policy and that I should back up the Intel folder on his C drive, and I should do it daily at 2 p.m. Right, so that gives you a very quick view of what we can do with applying policies or multiple policies to many machines. Now, let's look at some of the other policies, and it comes pre-baked with some example policies. For example, for most workstation or laptop environments on a Windows network, you would want to set it up so it will back up the C user's public folder, but it's easy to add other things to the backup policy. Now, if I want to apply a policy to a deployment, it's simple. I got this deployment here. I can edit the deployment, and I have a list here of the policies that I can apply, and then I can just simply select the policy I want to apply to that user. So it's extremely simple to add a user into that policy. Now, if we talk for a moment about the client side of Pulse, Pulse installs a service on all the machines that it's managing. And that service checks in with the Pulse server once an hour. So it can take up to an hour for the policy changes that I've applied in the cloud to propagate out to all the clients on my network. And I can see all the information about that through the event system. So for example, if a policy has been applied to a machine and there was a problem, that's going to show up as an event. And so really the heart and soul of Pulse is the event system and the deployment system. So if we look at the different event types that Pulse supports, it gives you a great sense of what Pulse can do. And here are the event types Pulse supports. Client software installed, client software uninstalled, scheduled backup ran successfully, scheduled backup ran with errors, scheduled backup failed to run. That's a really important report to be able to run, to see all the backups that were meant to run but didn't. Manual backup ran successfully. Let's see if I can zoom in here a bit. Hope that's better. Backup ran that Pulse cannot analyze. That's important. Pulse is backward compatible. It'll work with any SOS technology going back to the beginning of 2009. But not all versions Pulse can do detailed diagnostics on. So anything released in this calendar year, Pulse can do detailed diagnostics on. Manual backup ran, or here are some policy event life cycles. Server policy applied to client, error applying server policy to a client. So that's important to see as well. Central managed enabled or disabled, backup policies created, activated, and disabled, error, log files moved around. And if we look at how events are broken out, we can see some interesting information. So we can build reports against all these things. So I'm sure most of the people on the line are power users and want to build your own reports. And you can do that by joining on these different columns. Event categories, so you can see you've got deployment, backup management, and config. Error levels, so error level 2 are fatal events that you really need to pay attention to. Application that the error, or I beg your pardon, the event originated from. So I think that really goes a long way to summarizing what Pulse is capable of doing. Got a few questions here so far. Bob Ellison asks, does multiple policies equal multiple backup jobs? Yes, Bob. So a backup job for us is a deployment. So if you want to have multiple backup jobs running on one PC, you just put you have 2 accounts on it. So let's say my laptop, I'd have Ken's laptop 1, Ken's laptop 2. On Ken's laptop 1, that's a deployment. I set that up to back up every day and back up my docs. And then on Ken's laptop 2, I set that up to run on Fridays and to back up my whole C drive, for example. And then I can control both of those separately through Pulse. Anthony Connor asks, does it matter if they're on different operating systems? No, Anthony, it doesn't. So I can manage all my different clients on this through this one console. Okay, no other questions on Pulse so far. All right, so we've discussed deployment and we've seen control. Now let's look at the reporting capabilities of Pulse. And if we go back and if we have a look at the website under reporting, we can see that we've got the ability to monitor our backups so that Pulse does continuous automatic backup health monitoring for you. So now you don't have to worry about monitoring your backups yourself manually. The Pulse system is automatically monitoring them for you and reporting status on health. View backup events, so we talked about those different event types, and we can slice and dice our reports based on all of the different events in the application lifecycle. So we can see all our information about software installation or uninstallation or versions that it's running, backups that ran successfully, backups that ran with errors. So if we want to, for example, drill in and see, let's look at a backup session. So if we view some backup sessions, and I can sort. So I can sort by when backup sessions started. I can filter. So if I just want to see backup sessions that ran on Wagner LT, okay, we got these backup sessions ran on Wagner LT. Let's look at this guy because one file was transferred, but there was one error. So if I click into this guy, here I've actually got detailed client logs. Now this looks a little bit like gibberish, but it means something to the SOS support personnel. So when if there was an error on the PC, we've got all the data that we need here to diagnose the problem without needing to go onto the machine. And if we want to go one level more granular, this actually shows you, I can actually see every single file that was backed up in that backup. So in that particular session, 2,346 files were processed. And I can see every single one of them. I can see it by username, file name, when it was protected, the date the file was last modified. All that data is available for me in the cloud on demand. So the power it gives you to report and have visibility into the system is is really something we haven't seen before, not only at SOS, but from any vendor. If we look at some of the other events that we might want to look at, really, I mean, we can go to all events and we can then just filter it and cross-reference it by anything. So if I want to, I can filter it by backup account or by event types, usually a good one. So if I want to look at my scheduled backups that ran, so on this system, yeah. So if I want to see scheduled backups, I can filter by those different event types. If we look at, say, if I want to see server policy applied to client, so this first one I can see a warning, partially applied backup policy to backup deployment 5 on this machine for this user. Warning details are